Dr. Mark Hurtig is a researcher at the Ontario Veterinary College with an interest in treating lameness using some very innovative therapies. As a rider and veterinarian, what precautions do you take starting a horse back into training after a significant amount of time off? Because this is going to be the case for a lot of people quite soon with this pandemic.
Yeah, this is an unusual year, and many of us have been campaigning our horses in the southern U.S., where we get a first season, and then usually we would come back for a second season here in Canada. This is very different, and it's not unusual for horses that have seen a very intense training regime for several months that then are laid off and have a period of relative inactivity. Those horses are at risk for stress fractures because the horse is a bit anomalous in that once it has a bone injury, that can be microscopic, but it triggers a remodeling event in the bone where bone is usually resorbed and then subsequently laid down in this repair mechanism. Unfortunately, the horse is anomalous in that it can have a very sustained resorption period, and this can lead to a weak spot in the bone. So it's very important that now horses that may be laid off are returned to exercise some kind of incremental fashion so that we condition them slowly. So that could be lots of walking, some trotting, preferably not on hard surfaces, and lots of that before we start them back at their higher level activities that are requiring the agility and speed that we expect of them. So I think that's super important at this point in the cycle that we're experiencing. I also think that horses, we're all anxious to get back to riding after this period, but I think going back and drilling horses on, their hardest activities and their most complex moves, that's going to create a lot of mental stress, both for the horse and rider. So I think we really need to sit back and think, okay, what can I do to make this horse's life better, and to allow it to relax and to move forward in the bridle, and not ask it for its most difficult tasks repeatedly and drill them on it. So I think that this could be an issue, as many of us will be very anxious to get back and restart a competitive season as soon as possible. There's also another aspect that we're looking at in more detail, and I think people are aware of this, and that is synthetic surfaces. After training in the US and in Canada, we know that there are some beautiful facilities that have synthetic surfaces, and those allow us to train in all kinds of weather. And in Canada, that's important to us. But we also know that from not necessarily my research, but other people's research, and my observation is that horses that are trained consistently on those surfaces, they need a period of adaptation to the surface. And training them only on that type of surface leads to injuries. In many cases, these horses need cross training, because they will adapt to the synthetic surface, but that synthetic surface is, so we could call it sticky, or tends to stop their foot very quickly as it penetrates the surface. That can create biomechanical consequences that lead to injuries. So we're recommending that people cross-train on other surfaces, on sod, on uneven surfaces a little bit. If you're an eventer, then you're going to want to train on uneven surfaces, sod and fields, because that's what your horse is going to do. If you're a dressage horse, but you're going to go to different kinds of facilities that have sand surfaces or synthetic surfaces, then you need to train on both because the horse's brain will adapt and it'll change the way it moves slightly. So when it drives the foot into the surface, it will adapt to the way that surface responds to the foot. So cross training on different surfaces, I think, is really important, particularly for the highly athletic horses. And this will help us avoid things like high suspensory injuries and tendon injuries that are essentially overuse injuries from repeated injury.
Lots of good tips there, and yeah, that very important reminder to start slowly for all of us that are going to be eager to get back into the tack. Approximately what period of time does it take before the horse is ready for harder work, do you think? But I know we need to do a lot of walking at first.
Yes, I think that can be very different for different occupations. But horses that have to move at high speed or over fences, or horses that are competing in higher levels of dressage, horses that are in Western games, horses that people are roping off of. Those are all horses that are seeing considerable biomechanical challenge to their musculoskeletal system. And it wouldn't be unusual for if they're active for a period of 2 or more months, it wouldn't be unusual to expect a horse to be in a 3-month preparation period before the highest level of performance again. And even that may be inadequate. The evidence is that muscle adapts quickly, bone adapts relatively quickly, ligaments and tendons adapt the slowest. So that's why we see a lot of ligament and tendon injuries. There's actually some evidence that it may take up to a year to get tendons and ligaments up to Olympic levels of performance.
All right.